The flickering flames of the campfire cast eerie shadows across the faces of the new rangers as they gathered around me, their eyes wide with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. They had heard whispers of the dark secrets that lurked within the heart of Whispering Pines, but nothing could prepare them for the grim reality of the horrors that awaited them. I cleared my throat, my voice low and somber as I began to speak. Listen closely, for the tale I'm about to share with you is not for the faint of heart. It is a story of an unspeakable evil that stalks these woods, leaving a trail of blood and terror in its wake. The rangers leaned in closer, their breath held in anticipation as they hung on my every word. There is a phenomenon that occurs within the depths of Whispering Pines, I continued, my gaze distant and haunted. A trail of bloody footprints that appears on the paths leading deep into the forest. It is a sight that has chilled the blood of even the bravest among us. A macabre reminder of the darkness that dwells within these trees. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in, watching as a flicker of unease passed over the faces of the young rangers. Rule 6 exists for a reason, I said, my voice taking on a harsh edge. It is a warning, a reminder that to follow those bloody footprints is to invite death and despair. For those who are foolish enough to venture down that crimson path are never seen again. Their bodies never found. Their fates forever lost to the shadows. I could see the fear in their eyes now. The dawning realization that the dangers they faced were far more terrifying than they had ever imagined. I learned this lesson the hard way, I continued, my voice barely above a whisper. It was early in my days as a ranger, a time when I was still young and foolish, full of a reckless curiosity that would nearly be my undoing. I had stumbled upon a set of bloody footprints while on patrol, a trail that led off the path and into the depths of the forest. My mind flashed back to that fateful day, the memory of those crimson stains still vivid and haunting, even after all these years. I should have turned back then, I admitted, my voice heavy with regret. I should have heeded the warnings that had been drilled into me, the lessons that had been passed down by those who came before. But some dark fascination took hold of me, a morbid desire to uncover the truth behind those bloody footprints, to see where they led and what horrors lay at their end. I could feel the tension in the air, the rangers hanging on my every word, their faces etched with a mix of horror and fascination. I stepped off the trail, my heart pounding in my chest as I began to follow the crimson path. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees looming overhead like silent sentinels, their branches reaching out to grasp and ensnare. With each step, I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing down upon me, the sense of some malevolent presence watching from the shadows. I shuddered, the memory of that oppressive darkness still fresh in my mind, even after all these years. And then, just as I was about to take another step, I felt a hand grasp my shoulder, yanking me back from the edge of the abyss. I spun around, my heart in my throat, only to find myself face to face with a grizzled old ranger, his eyes blazing with a mix of anger and fear. I paused, letting the impact of that moment sink in, watching as the rangers exchanged uneasy glances. That ranger was Marcus, a veteran of the woods who had seen more horrors than any man should ever have to bear. And as he stared me down, his grip tight on my shoulder, I knew that I had just brushed up against something truly terrible, a darkness that threatened to consume me whole. I could see the unease on the faces of the young rangers, the growing realization that they had just stepped into a world far more terrifying than they had ever imagined. And that, my friends, is just the beginning of the grim tale that I have to share with you tonight. For the true horror of those bloody footprints lies not in the trail itself, but in the dark history that spawned it, and the terrible fate that awaits all those who dare to follow its crimson path. As I locked eyes with each of the rangers in turn, I could see the weight of my words settling over them like a shroud, the understanding that they had just taken their first steps into a nightmare from which there may be no waking. As the weight of my words hung heavy in the air, I could see the fear etched upon the faces of the young rangers, their minds reeling with the implications of the bloody trail and the dark secrets that lay at its end. But even as they grappled with the horror of my tale, I knew that they had only scratched the surface of the nightmare that awaited them in the depths of Whispering Pines. Marcus, the veteran ranger who had pulled me back from the brink of the abyss, was a man haunted by the horrors he had witnessed in these woods, I continued, my voice low and grim. As he led me away from the bloody trail, his grip still tight on my shoulder, I could see the weight of those horrors etched upon his weathered face, the scars of a lifetime spent battling the darkness that lurked within the heart of the forest. I paused, my gaze distant as I recalled the haunted look in Marcus's eyes, the unspoken terrors that seemed to cling to him like a second skin. When we were far enough away from the trail, Marcus turned to me, his voice harsh and urgent as he spoke. "You don't know what you were about to get yourself into, boy," he growled, his eyes blazing with a mix of anger and fear. "Those bloody footprints, they're not just some random occurrence, some twisted prank or sick joke. They're a warning, a sign of the evil that haunts these woods, the darkness that preys upon the unwary and the foolish." I could see the rangers leaning in closer, their eyes wide with a morbid fascination as they hung on Marcus's every word. Marcus spoke of a group of campers who had ventured into the woods years before, a group of young, carefree souls who had stumbled upon the bloody trail and made the fateful decision to follow it. "They were just like you," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of memory. "Young, curious, full of a reckless desire to uncover the truth behind the macabre scene that lay before them. But they had no idea what horrors awaited them at the end of that crimson path." I shuddered, the image of those doomed campers flashing before my eyes, their faces etched with a mixture of excitement and trepidation as they set off down the trail. Marcus described how the campers had followed the bloody footprints deeper and deeper into the woods, their flashlights bobbing in the darkness like errant fireflies. As the night wore on and the trail twisted and turned, they found themselves hopelessly lost, the bloody path leading them in circles, drawing them ever further into the heart of the forest. I could feel the tension in the air, the rangers holding their breath as they awaited the grim conclusion of Marcus's tale. And then, just as the campers were beginning to lose hope, just as they were starting to realize the terrible mistake they had made, the screams began. Marcus spoke of a sound that had haunted his dreams for years, a piercing, agonized wail that had echoed through the trees like the shrieks of the damned. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated terror, a sound that sent shivers down the spines of all who heard it and chilled the blood in their veins. I could see the horror dawning on the faces of the rangers, their minds struggling to comprehend the awful fate that had befallen those unfortunate campers. Marcus and the other rangers had rushed to the scene, their hearts pounding with a sickening sense of dread as they followed the echoes of those terrible screams. But by the time they reached the spot where the campers had last been seen, it was too late. The clearing was empty, the ground churned up and soaked with blood, the air heavy with the coppery tang of death and the sickly sweet stench of decay. I paused, my throat tight with the memory of Marcus's haunted face, the anguish that had etched itself into every line and furrow of his weathered skin. And that, Marcus had said, his voice barely above a whisper, was the last anyone ever saw of those poor doomed souls. They vanished into the depths of Whispering Pines, their fates forever lost to the darkness that had claimed them, their bodies never found, their names added to the long list of those who had fallen victim to the forest's insatiable hunger. As I finished Marcus's grim tale, I could see the weight of it settling over the Rangers like a shroud, their faces pale and drawn as they grappled with the enormity of the horror that lurked within the heart of the woods. But even as they struggled to come to terms with the awful truth of the bloody trail and the fate of the missing campers, I knew that the worst was yet to come. For there was one final chapter to my macabre tale, one last twist in the dark history of Whispering Pines that would shake them to their very core and leave them forever changed by the knowledge of the evil that dwelt within these cursed woods. For years, the disappearance of those unfortunate campers remained a mystery, a dark stain upon the history of Whispering Pines. I continued, my voice low and somber. Search parties combed the woods for days, weeks, even months, but no trace of them was ever found. It was as if they had simply vanished into the ether, their fates forever lost to the shadows that haunted these ancient trees. I paused, my gaze distant as I recalled the long, fruitless searches, the mounting despair and frustration that had gripped the ranger station as each lead turned up empty and each trail went cold. But then, on a day much like this one, when the sun hung low in the sky and the shadows grew long and deep, I made a discovery that would forever shatter any illusions I had about the nature of the evil that lurked within Whispering Pines. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The Rangers leaned in closer, their eyes wide with a morbid anticipation as they hung on my every word. I was on patrol, my mind heavy with the weight of the missing campers and the countless other mysteries that haunted these woods, when I stumbled upon a hidden grove deep within the forest. It was a place I had never seen before, a small, circular clearing ringed by ancient trees, their trunks gnarled and twisted like arthritic fingers grasping at the sky. I shuddered, the memory of that eerie grove still fresh in my mind. The unnatural stillness that had hung heavy in the air. The sense of something ancient and malevolent lurking just beyond the veil of perception. As I stepped into the clearing, my heart pounding with a nameless dread, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, piled in the center of the grove, was a mound of bones, picked clean and gleaming white in the dappled sunlight. And among those bones, scattered like macabre confetti, were the tattered remains of clothing and gear. The unmistakable detritus of human presence. I could hear the sharp intake of breath from the Rangers, their faces pale and stricken as the realization of what I had found washed over them like a wave of icy water. In that moment, as I stood there staring at the grim remains of those long-lost campers, I understood the terrible truth of Whispering Pines. The bloody trail, the missing hikers, the countless disappearances over the years, they were all part of some dark, insatiable hunger that lurked within the heart of the forest, a malevolent force that preyed upon the unwary and the innocent, luring them to their doom with a siren's call of crimson footprints and whispered promises. My voice was shaking now, the weight of that awful revelation still heavy upon my soul, the memory of those gleaming bones forever seared into my mind's eye. And as I stood there in that eerie grove, the shadows lengthening around me and the air heavy with the stench of death and decay, I knew that I had stumbled upon a truth that few had ever survived to tell. Whispering Pines was more than just a forest. It was a living, breathing entity. A predator that hungered for human flesh and human suffering. A darkness that would never be satisfied until it had consumed every last one of us. And so I leave you with this final warning. A grim reminder of the terrible fate that awaits all those who dare to tread the bloody path, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Rule 6 exists for a reason. It is a bulwark against the darkness that hungers within these woods. A last line of defense against the evil that seeks to consume us all. Heed its warning, and never, ever follow the trail of blood. No matter how curious you may be, no matter how strong the temptation to uncover the truth behind its macabre mystery. As I finished my tale, the campfire had burned low, the flames flickering weakly against the gathering darkness. The rangers sat in stunned silence, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes haunted by the knowledge of the nightmare they had just been inducted into. And as I looked out into the sea of stricken faces, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of grim satisfaction, a sense that I had done my duty in preparing them for the horrors that awaited them in the depths of Whispering Pines. For only by confronting the darkness head-on, by staring unflinchingly into the abyss and acknowledging the evil that lurked within, could we hope to arm ourselves against it and emerge unscathed from its grasp. But even as I took solace in that small victory, I knew that the true horror of Whispering Pines was far from over. For the forest was a living, breathing thing, a predator that would never rest, never stop its relentless hunt for new victims to feed its insatiable hunger.